my name is Sadie Jones, and this is my instructional materials assignment. The target group of students I'm looking at for this assignment is a second grade public school classroom located somewhere in Utah. This classroom has 3 English language learners in it. All 3 of these ELs speak Spanish as their first language, and they all have an English language proficiency of emerging to developing. So they're still very focused on building and applying vocabulary, and as a teacher, I'd be giving them plenty of opportunity to practice speaking. The material that I chose is a children's book called My House by Elisa Desimini. I chose this book because it has very simple words and pictures. I thought it was very creative and open-ended. It talks about a house in different seasons of weather. And I just loved the pictures in it, the way that the house was described. It was not too specific a storyline or even illustration, so that it was something that I think that all cultures could relate to. The subject of a house is something that hopefully all children have an experience with. It also uses some creative non-literal language, such as personification, that I think would be useful for ELs to have experience with and become familiar with. So the task that I would have my students do is, before reading the book, I would ask students what they think of when they hear the word house. And their responses could include a variety of answers, such as what their own homes are like, maybe other homes such as trailer houses or apartments or other shelters. Children, when they hear the word house, might even think about playing house, or they might think of a doll house. And this activity relates to the concept we talked about in class about how applying personal context to a word really helps students make meaning of language. Having students talk about what they think of when they hear the word house allows them to come up with their own image and associations with that word to make it more meaningful to them personally than if they were to simply have me as a teacher give them a simple definition of the word that goes to a specific image of a house. It also shows that there could be more than one meaning to the word house. We talked about this in class. I think the example we used was with the word dog, how we all thought of different dogs. And this relates to Saussure's theory about the 2 parts of language, lang and parole, where lang is the system of language and the rules that we follow, where parole is more of the individual creative part of language that includes sort of an infinite number of variety of how language is used daily. And I think it is super important for English language to understand parole and the more creative part of language. So while it's important for them to use correct grammar, it's also important for them to be able to make personal meaning and see that there can be multiple associations with language so that they can fully express their own personal emotions, experiences, and ideas, rather than simply using a memorized system. Another thing I might have my students do is, after reading the book, I would have them maybe turn to a partner and answer questions such as, is your house like the house in this story? How is it different or similar? What is your favorite thing about your house? And talking to peers and responding to open-ended questions will really help with the zone of proximal development. As students talk to each other and respond to open-ended questions, the conversations they have and the things they choose to focus on and learn becomes very student-directed. And in this way, the students are developing their own meaning. And as a teacher, I'd be very interested in listening to what my English language learning students talk about with their partners, so I can see what meaning they are creating and seeing that development in action. That will really allow me to determine what they're going to need from me later to help solidify that meaning and making understanding. So some limitations of this book activity, I think, are that while it might be a good opportunity for students to become familiar with personification, like the book uses my house wakes up at daybreak, it might be confusing to English language learners that a house can wake up. It could cause them to feel lost or maybe lose focus of maybe the broader idea of the book without the proper guidance and explanation from a teacher of what the language is doing in this situation. So as a teacher, I would need to be aware of that going into it. I think another limitation is that the questions and tasks might not be beneficial to all the students. While it might be a very good practice and a good challenge for English language learning students to talk about houses and their houses and homes, it's something that's very natural for students who have grown up as native English speakers to talk about their house. It's something very common, and it wouldn't be very challenging to them. I think that the task of talking about what comes to mind when you hear the word house is super useful and can be used for a variety of words and situations. After reading this book, I might repeat this exercise with other words and maybe objects around the classroom that could be helpful for my English language learners to understand and make meaning of. I also love from this book the topic of houses. I think it could be extended to include a conversation about life at home and family life. I think it's important for students to talk about what goes on at their home and their lives outside the classroom to each other. It's a great way to introduce cultural diversity, so that an English-speaking student might talk to an English language learner and see, oh, they speak a different language at home. That is so cool. We can learn from each other. And it really also helps the English language learners to be able to talk about their experiences and feel validated in their culture.